Portal Guiame está em Oslo, na Noruega, e estamos agora ao lado de Ann-Helen Sperrud. Ela é vice-líder da JOCUM aqui na Noruega. And thank you so much for having us. How do you see Christianity here in Norway?
Well, that's a good question. We used to be a Christian nation where, more or less everyone believed in Jesus. That's not how it is these days. We're much more a post-Christian nation than we are a Christian nation, even though publicly you might say we're a Christian nation. But how we live is basically a post-Christian nation, a very post-modern nation as well, secular. And we used to, like many people used to believe in Jesus, but now not that many. So we were becoming more and more a subculture, to be honest, in society. So it's not very often young kids or teenagers. They hide their faith more than show it because it's more frowned upon. They're afraid to be ridiculed or afraid to be added on opinions that they don't have, for instance, because it's not very popular. And very often you're maybe one or two Christians in a class, or maybe there's none actually. So. We used to be a Christian nation, but it looks very different now.
And what are the biggest dilemmas for Norwegian Christians here? And why did they lose so much interest in Christianity in this country?
I think it's a difficult question to answer fast, but I think the last, obviously this has been developing over years. And one of the things that culturally are over Norway is, I think it's passivity. And when you get passive in your faith, and when you're not active in your faith, that's just one of those dilemmas that I think many Christians are experiencing right now. That we're comfortable. We struck oil in the 60s, and we have a very comfortable lifestyle. That's not necessarily the best thing for faith. We haven't been persecuted for our faith. You see the church in China, persecuted church in China. That's growing immensely. But here it's been very comfortable, and I'm not necessarily thinking that that's why so many leave faith, but I don't think it's helping either. And then we've also been drifting, I think, in our faith, and I think every generation have to choose Jesus for themselves. Every generation have to choose missions for themselves, and that's one of the things we want to talk about here at the Send is missions. Calling for a new generation. And I think when you activate your faith, that's one of the things that keep your faith alive. But if you get passive, that's I think one of the spiritual things over Norway actually. That's passivity. And when you get passive in your faith, you're dozing off. I don't think that's helping. In Norway you guys are passionate in your expression. We're very much down to earth. And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just culturally we act differently. But in that you do get passive and I think too laid back in our faith. Yeah. And I think also when you get passive, you don't share your faith. New people don't hear about Jesus. And after 10, 20, 30 years with that, obviously a new generation grows up not being on fire for Jesus. And you find other things to be on fire for. It's just how life is. I think as people or just human beings in general, we like to give ourselves to something bigger than ourselves. And if you don't give it to God, you'll give it to something else.
Why is an event like the Send so important to impact Norway?
Mostly the Send is, we want to mobilize young teenagers and young 20-year-olds, like 16 to 29. That's like our main group of people. Obviously younger and older as well, but that's what we're focusing on at the Send. That's one of the things we want to mobilize for, that a new generation actually grasp a calling for missions but for themselves, because every generation needs to grasp that. It doesn't go in generations necessarily. Each person has to grab it for themselves, and that's what we're hoping that they will. The thing is that in Norway there was one of the organizations we're partnering with at the Send. They did a survey in 2018 with Christian students in Norway. And 91.7% of them were hiding their faith. They didn't want questions. They were afraid to get difficult questions they couldn't answer. They didn't want people to think they were Christians. Like, they were just hiding their faith. And when you have 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds hiding their faith in that way, there's no boldness. You don't share your faith with anyone. And then what happens to your faith, you know? And right now, we're surviving, but how will this look in 25 years? But filling up a stadium like this, we have 9,260, I think, people in here now. And if every single one in here says yes to the calling over their life, if it's missions or it's in a different spheres of society or like whatever it is, if they say yes to that, things can change. Like, if you see this over 25 years, Norway and Europe can be changed by that. Because we need that yes. People need to say yes to something. We give our lives to something anyway. It's just that giving your life to Jesus, that's an eternity thing. And we really want to activate people and give the opportunity to say yes to Jesus and the calling that Jesus has over people's lives.
Yeah. Do you think that Norway and Nordic countries need to be seen as a mission field?
Norway used to be one of the nations that was sending out the most missionaries compared to how many people we are. So we used to be a huge mission-sending country, actually. We are not anymore. The last 30 years, it's been increasing drastically. But my hope and my prayer is that in a year, 5 and 10 years, those people in there, we will see so many people again say yes to missions and yes to going to the difficult places. Because the Norwegian missionaries, like 100 years ago, they went to difficult places. It wasn't the easy places they went to. So our inheritance as Norwegians is going to the difficult, unreached peoples. And I pray that we can see a new wave of that to the unreached in the world.
Great revivals took place here in Europe, and today this is one of the most secularized continents of the world. Do you believe that Europe can experience a revival again?
Of course. Because I believe in God, and He is love, and He loves Europe. He has never, and He won't give up on Europe, because that's the character of God. He doesn't give up. So yes, I truly believe that we can experience revival again, and I hope we do. But as we're waiting for that, I want to have young people activate their faith so they start to share. And then just imagine what can happen. If 10,000 people say yes to sharing the gospel to 3 friends the next month, that's 30,000 people the next month. If that just keeps happening, this can look like a revival really fast. So I'm praying and hoping that we see a new revival in Europe, because we desperately need it.
Could you please talk about YWAM work here in Norway?
Yes, of course. YWAM is actually 50 years in Norway this year. So this is our 50th celebration. And I think the Send is the best way we could celebrate that. Even though we don't focus on that at all in this event. But I find it interesting that the year we turn 50 in Norway is the year we gather so many teenagers. And I think, we're called Youth with a Mission. And I just find it very appropriate that we're focusing on youth. In Norway, we have 450 staff, more or less. We have 8 different bases where we have different kinds of work. We have our disciple traineeship schools, like mission training schools. And we also have, obviously, a variety of work. The last years, we also had traveling teams leading up to the Send. And that's basically just evangelizing in the streets, going to youth groups, in the churches, like the remote churches where there's not that many people. And I think that's, if I should point to one thing, the last years that we're doing, and we also did that 50 years ago, but if there's one thing we see is that going out to meet new people, to meet the teenagers, to revive their faith and to give them new hope, and to be radical about the following of Jesus. That's what we're about. meeting new young people, and making Jesus Lord. I think that's one of those topics that keeps popping up. The radical following Jesus, being all in. I think that's what I love that YWAM is standing for. It's not half in or half out. It's the all in. And obviously that's what the Send is about today, but it's also a message that YWAM has been carrying for 50 years here in Norway. So yeah, it's an honor to be a part of this. It really is.